Anybody who watches this channel, even a few times, and maybe follows a link or two, or signs up for our Twitter feed or Facebook page, you know this channel is about two things. It's about black violence and denial. It's about how reporters look at this explosion of black violence so wildly out of proportion, and they look at it and they will do anything not to tell us the race of the people involved in what just happened. They ignore, deny, excuse, condone, encourage, and even lie about what we just read about. And so we're left to talk to people who were there. We're left to rely on cops sending us emails. We're left to tracking down people who got arrested, their electronic records in jail, and dozens and dozens of other ways to figure out, was this a case of black on white crime? Black on young, black on old, black on gay, black on straight, black on Asian, black on kitties, puppies, turtles, or goldfish crime? And more often than not, that is what we find. And when you go into the local newspapers where you see this kind of crime happening, these are the same papers that one day they're talking about Black Lives Matter and how black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. The next day, there's some horrific black on white crime, and the same people are so eager to report on the race of Black Lives Matter, look at this black on white crime, shrug their shoulders and go, what? I don't see anything going on there, Colin. That really drives people ballistic all over the country. People that read this, watch this channel, part of what we're doing right here, and people who are not, that just naturally see it happening. They leave lots and lots of comments to stories all over the country going, why won't you tell us who committed that crime? Tell us for two reasons. One, if there are a bunch of black people running around committing crimes, we should have a description of them, including their race. And two, if you're going to make a big deal about black racism over here, you have to tell us what's happening with black violence over there. But the newspapers, they just blow that off. The TV blows it off. The radio blows it off. And they pretend they're doing a great job. Now comes this guy named Tom Winter, who's a reporter for NBC News out of New York City. Boy, he reports on police, courts, corruption, cybersecurity, counterterrorism stories in the eastern United States. Tom's a big shot. Or so he would have us believe. But Tom really wants us to believe something more pressing than the fact that he's a big shot. He wants us to believe, he wants us to know that all these stories that are going around about how the news media is in denial, deceit, and delusion about black criminality. He said, well, that's all not true. This is what he tweeted yesterday, and somebody sent to me. These stories about us ignoring stuff, that's totally incorrect. We report the race when it is known, black, white, Asian, etc. It doesn't matter to us. We always report it the same. Okay, I kind of thought that ship had sailed. After writing 2 books documenting how reporters do ignore it, do deny it, do condone it, over and over and over and over and over, I kind of thought, well, there's not really that much left to be said about this, is there? Guess I was wrong about that. You know, when we talk about the difference between black crime and white crime, the one crime where there's the greatest amount of difference, but the least said, it's almost taboo to talk about this, is rape. Black on white rape exceeds white on black rape by thousands and thousands and thousands to 1 every year in this country. The numbers are so out of whack, I hesitate to even state some of them because that's how unbelievable they are. But rape in this country is really a black thing. That's how wildly out of proportion it is. I mean, but even so, that didn't stop Toni Morrison, who was Obama's favorite novelist, from talking about in an interview she wants to see a white man convicted for raping a black woman. Now, the reason she said that is because she said, as long as we're not arresting white guys for arresting black women, because we know what's happening, that is proof positive of racial bias built into the system. That is another example of relentless black victimization and white racism. So she wants to see a lot of these rapists arrested and imprisoned. Notice when people say stuff like this, they never bring somebody forward and say, yes, here's a black woman. She was raped by a bunch of white people. Yes, here are the 911 calls. Here's the videos. Here's the victims. Here's all here's all the police reports. Here's all the stuff we use to figure out what really happened in a story. She just says stuff and just hopes nobody will notice that she just totally made it up. She's not the first one to kind of fantasize and have delusions about rape in this country. Anybody that grew up in the 60s, and I don't really put myself in that category, but my older brothers did, so I kind of kept an eye on them. But I remember reading this book, Soul on Ice. Eldridge Cleaver talked about how he and his fellas would drive from one part of town, the black part of town, to the white part of town, so they could rape white chicks and have a lot of fun doing it. This isn't a best-selling book. Eldridge Cleaver said, rape was an insurrectionary act. I wanted to send waves of consternation throughout the white race. So we have this enormous difference between black rape and white rape, enormous. And we're still kind of seeing proof of that happening every day. You know, one of the things we talked about in Don't Make the Black Kids Angry is the enormous number of rape kits, untested rape kits all over the country. I think at one time the number was at like 400,000. I mean, in places like Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Atlanta, Philly, I mean, lots and lots of chocolate cities. They had tens of thousands in each city, kits that were untested. So down in Atlanta, a year or two ago, some brainiac came up and said, hey, why don't we start testing these kits? And this happened.
Night at 10, take a look at this man. Shabazz thought he was about to be released from federal prison. Instead, investigators say he's facing nearly a dozen state rape charges.
Now, these new charges are because of the Fulton County DA's push to process backlogged rape kits. We've been reporting on this story for months, and this is one of the big breaks. Now, Fox 5's Jaclyn Schultz is live in Fulton County, where she spoke with prosecutors about this disturbing case. Jaclyn.
Investigators say some of these crimes go back as far as 16 years. A number of these women could describe the same attacker, but for years authorities had no name until prosecutors say DNA test kits led them to 54-year-old Shabazz.
Relief. Gratitude that they had finally been notified after all of these years that their assailant had finally been captured.
Up to 16 years later, investigators say women who were followed and raped at gunpoint will finally see their alleged attacker face justice.
They reacted like this had happened to them yesterday. They remembered the incidents, their sexual assault in chilling detail.
Irina Kossin, a prosecutor who works with the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Task Force at the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, says at least 15 girls and women were victims of 54-year-old Shabazz. And through DNA testing, authorities named him as the culprit. From December 2001 to May 2005, Fulton prosecutors say Shabazz targeted women between the ages of 15 and 22 while walking alone at night. After he drove up to them, investigators say he forced them into his car, drove victims to a park or abandoned home to sexually assault them.
That this perpetrator's identity remained unknown for so many years, even though these women shared many of the same details, that they were sexually assaulted in the same places, in the same manner.
Prosecutors say Shabazz was arrested in August 2005 for robbery and had been already sitting in federal prison, but had left his DNA in over a dozen rape cases, including one from 2003 that sat at Grady Memorial Hospital for years. In 2015 and 2016, the state started its work to process thousands of untested sexual assault kits across Georgia. And in 2017, the Fulton DA's office got word the male DNA matched Shabazz, and DNA in a dozen other rape cases. Cossin says the woman he targeted had been waiting for their attacker to be named for years.
They were all extremely cooperative and anxious to see this offender brought to justice, to make sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to other young women in the community.
Okay, good for police in Atlanta. Somehow they mustered up the money, they mustered up the intestinal fortitude to start testing these kits. But this must be said about the testing program in Atlanta and Detroit and Memphis and New Orleans and lots of other chocolate cities around the country. There are still gajillions of untested rape kits around the country, and they're only untested for one reason. Nobody wants to test them. Nobody wants to test the rape kits in chocolate cities. If they wanted them tested, they'd be tested by now. But they sit on the shelves gathering dust because the people who run these cities are deathly afraid of what would happen if you started testing these kits and arresting black rapists by the thousands in each one of these cities. So they sit there with excuses. They sit there being ignored. They sit there with all sorts of fairy tales about why we're not testing these rape kits, when the one fact remains, when all of their denial, deceit, and delusion spews forward and they're done with that, the one thing remains is they would test them if they wanted to catch the rapists. But they don't, because catching black rapists in chocolate cities is guaranteed to make the black kids angry.